Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the third live stream of the day. This is a Wolfram language design review, part of our language completeness and consistency series. And we have a variety of topics to go over here. Converting, just a second. Converting out of core audio to in core. Okay, so the basic point here is we've got
right. So we don't have anything like this, right? What we have right now is a store now button that, when you have an expression that's too large to fit in the notebook, you're given the option to store that expression, which is not saved in the notebook, which is, you can embed it directly in the notebook, or you can in fact save it in a local object, which is an external
so
external file.
And it also allows me to store in cloud.
Right.
Well, this is all magnificent, yeah.
Right. So now you want a similar sort of button for out of core audios, but the first point I am making, that is a completely different operation, because you're taking one expression and you're changing it to a completely different expression, right? You're basically importing the file. And right, the audio GUI is really quite different from summary boxes. So there are UX design type questions here.
Okay, so hold on, let me understand this. If I do this, to me, this feels like a thing. I mean, I don't know that this isn't in core sitting here. I mean, it doesn't happen to me, but I don't know that.
Yes, you do, because you see there's a file name.
Yeah. But that's technical detail. I mean, that's just, I see a dot, blah, blah, blah. The main point here is, I don't understand the difference. I really don't. I mean, I know implementationally it's different, but I don't understand from a user point of view why it's different.
Because you won't lose that data if you quit the kernel, whereas you lose the data that's in out of 40.
So what? I mean, okay, yes, that's a difference. I agree. That's the difference.
Right. One is about, preserving results that you get. And
hold on. If I say store in local object, what does this then look like after I press store in local object?
I'll try it.
Okay, that is deeply analogous to this, right? Because again, I won't lose the data if I exit the program. Right?
Correct.
So it's really the same situation as with the audio file.
But I'm confused about that sparse array case that I am not super familiar with. Does the input form of that change? Is it sparse array of local object?
I don't know. Let's find out.
It's the input form changes if you look at the held form, right? You need to hold it, right?
I see.
So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, there it is. It's just like an audio object.
Right, but you had nothing there and you slurped something in.
I don't understand that comment.
Right, if you copy out of 40 and put it in an input cell and try to evaluate it, nothing will happen.
If I take out of 40, yeah.
Copy that, paste it into an input cell.
With its local object.
Sorry, not that one. Because
yeah, exactly. This one, watch this.
Right. Of course, because it evaluated to, you imported it, it turned into a sparse array, and that sparse array typeset, right? Which is really quite different from the audio file. right? There's a non-trivial evaluation there.
I don't understand why you're saying this. I don't understand. Am I being really stupid here? To me, this, okay, good. Okay, to me, this case of the sparse array stored in a local object, its default happens to be different. But that case, that non-default case of sparse array, seems identical to this case here. What am I missing?
Well, there's no button there to store it. Right? You're wanting to add a button now. There is no button to store now.
I know. That's why we're talking about this, because I want to add
No. The sparse array has no button. You want to add a button to audio, but if they're completely analogous, there should be no button because the local object one has no button on it.
What local object one has no button? This one here, because it's already stored.
Exactly. Just like the data in card.
Okay, I finally understand what you're saying. I consider this as something of a detail, but I understand what you're saying. Okay, so what I'm proposing is that in this case, you are storing it in a second place, and you're going to use that other pointer, just like you can do that with persistent value. You can point to a different persistence location if you want to. So here, I'm saying, persist it differently from the way it was persisted before.
Okay, well, that's a different button which needs to be designed, and we need to think about the UX. I'm not saying that this button shouldn't exist. My point is that it's not the same as this existing button, even if we ignore the fact that the audio GUI.
Okay, I get your point. I finally understood your point, although I think it's a little bit of a narrowly defined point. But yes, I agree. I agree with the point.
There's also the point that, the audio GUI has 3 sizes. So where and when do we show this, and how? And how do we phrase things?
Okay. But you understand why it has extremely high value to do this. Maybe you don't understand.
No, I don't, because if I wanted to do that, I would just put an import and evaluate in place.
No, that won't work.
Why won't that work?
It will.
It absolutely will work.
Okay, but I don't think it's the right way to do it, because I think people are going to get confused.
So people are already confused also that audio object to transform it into an incur. We have this very weird usage of normal of it that stores all the data into the input form of the audio. So it is obscure. I think a button would help.
Okay, well, I'm not saying there shouldn't be a button. I'm just saying.
Yeah, there are ways.
My statement that it's the same button is wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
right. You're right. I was wrong. Okay. Although I claim I was only wrong in detail. Okay. Now what is? My God, what is that?
Right. So now it's an in-core object. It imported it. Right. I mean, if I had done audio of import of that file rather than audio of that file, or in fact, if I just done import of that file name, right, would I have gotten the same object as that normal there?
So this is something that was decided ages ago that I have never been particularly happy. There's a heuristic on the length of the signal, where import does 2 different things according to the length of the signal. So the answer is, if the length is below the threshold, yes, it will be an in-core one. If it is over, it will be an out-of-core one.
Oh, so what does normal do in that case? Or no?
No.
So import basically does nothing. It just returns audio file of blah.
If the length is bigger than a threshold.
Right.
But, and then so we need a way to affirmatively say. Go ahead.
And so does normal respect this threshold, or will normal?
No, normal will always try to bring stuff in.
I'll be back in a second.
Which means you can crash the front end if it's a very large audio file.
Absolutely.
So maybe normal should respect dollar inline. No, it's a system option. Right. We have a system option for, above which we don't present the store inline in the notebook button.
That sounds sensible. However, this kind of unclear behavior is.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, no, but that is a valid point. No objection. And I was asking offline to Lou about how big numeric arrays are stored, or in general, big chunks of data are stored in the cells. At the moment, it's using compressed data. A more efficient way would be to serialize the data with a FLAC lossless compression, similar to discussions that we've had with John about images, to minimize a bit the weight on the front end of each of these in-core audio objects.
Right, but that means updating the notebook format, right? Or...
I assume
so. So, I mean, this is something, of course, that that I'm considering, is how we can update the notebook format in a way that's not going to cause significant compatibility problems. And I have some thoughts about that.
Okay,
sorry, I missed a couple.
But we're not gonna solve this problem over the next month, just to be clear.
Okay, but can we solve the one problem that we can solve, which is a button to do a better defined version of what this was doing here? That's all I'm asking.
So I think, right. So I think, I mean, Lou seems to think, and I don't know if Carlo agrees, that the implementation of the button would, as in the kernel level or functionality, is pretty clear, right? We just need to
luckily the GUI was built in a sensible way, so the input form can be replaced.
Right. I think the more complicated questions are, what does the button look like? When do we show it? Right, and do we show it in all three states? Presumably, we don't show it in the tiny state.
Okay, I'm going to make a suggestion. Okay, I don't think seeing the file name is in the slightest bit useful. I think that what should be done here is it should just say paren data not in notebook or something. X number of megabytes paren data not in notebook paren X number of megabytes, and then it should have a mouse over that says, or something like this, I don't know, in the small state, because that real estate that you're using there to give a file name that nobody cares about just doesn't seem worthwhile.
I'm not sure it's true that nobody cares about it. Now, I think it would be useful if it was really just the file name, right? The problem there is that it's giving the whole path, right? If that's just said car.mp3, I might actually care about that, as opposed to, honking.
Okay, let me ask another question. Is there a fast, like for cryptography, we have the feature that you can tell if two things are the same by, if you say,
right. So if you go into the big state, right, shouldn't you see
you see the full file name. But what's interesting here is if I say table of generate symmetric key, not as clear as it might be, but it's clear, it's somewhat clear that those are different, even though I don't know what they actually are. And we could imagine doing a similar thing with these files, because really the main thing you need to know is just that they're different or whatever.
So the tooltip does help with that. It shows you a snippet of the waveform.
That is a very good point.
Right. And if you go into the expanded state, do you see the waveform or not?
No, there is when stuff is playing, that waveform will play. So there is no indication of the content of the whole object. It's just what is playing right now.
I mean, if we just had a tiny icon of the waveform, it seems like it would be really worthwhile.
That would be kind of expensive to compute, though.
Okay, well,
that's why we defer to the tooltip.
Then don't do it that way.
I for one I think the file name is useful. If you're importing, a dozen MP3s, you want to know which one came from which file at a glance. You don't want to have to look at tooltips.
Also, another point that I would like to make is that I'm not sure we should be that aggressive to the user, saying data not in notebook and kind of menacing disaster for that, just because.
Well, I would, because there will be a disaster.
No, so there are other ways to fix that, right? Not immediate.
Like
but,
what?
Okay,
like what?
Give me a sec. Give me a second to finish my thought here. So first of all, importing data into notebook without making changes to the notebook format can result in gigantic stuff being stored in a notebook. For example, a 3-minute audio file that is 3 megabytes as an MP3 will be 100 and something in the front end each time it is displayed, which is not great, right?
No, that's not great.
Yeah. One of the solutions that
what will be involved in having a version of compressed data that just is the string version of the MP3?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that we were looking at. MP3 is not great, obviously, because it's compressed, but there are other formats that are lossless. So yes, that is one of the potential options that I don't know that much about, but John probably will have a more sensible answer than mine.
Okay, so your point is that data in Notebook right now is not useful because of the blow-up factor.
And it depends on the use, right? If it's a small audio and you want to share your notebook with someone else, then yeah, that is...
Well, the alternative is to store it in the cloud.
Yes.
Which I think is
audio cloud object is a valid audio object, so absolutely, that the button should allow you to do that, for sure. One thing that John mentioned in one of the meetings was the whole concept of assets that could rely on a temporary file system. That would be another easy way to bundle stuff with a notebook.
Sure, but that's a much more complicated story.
Well, it's I'm hoping to find a subset of that story that is simple enough that we can deliver something useful for 13.2. It will definitely be a subset. Let me be extremely clear about that. But I don't think that's off the table.
Okay.
So, and all of the things I was saying, that is not to say that a store in notebook button or store in cloud button would not be useful. I am just saying that it shouldn't be as aggressive as the thing that you see.
Okay, fine. Then why don't we do this? Maybe we should put paren file after this.
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest the opposite, which is maybe not necessarily mutually exclusive, which for the inline ones, rather than just having the little tiny waveform there, that we say in Notebook or something like that. And
well, that's fine, but that's not the that one. I agree with you. We should do that. But this one here, we need to deal with this one because this is the one that is coming up by default most of the time, and that's the one from which you need to be storing cloud. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I think both storing cloud and storing notebook are useful.
So
fine. I understand that. I'm talking about the UX. I'm talking about the UX.
Question for the UX. After you've stored it in cloud, might you then want to store it in the notebook?
Yes.
In other words, this button persists in a way that it doesn't in the case of sparse array.
Well, you could say the same thing about sparse array, couldn't you? I mean, you could have a plus button in the case of the cloud. If it says data stored in local object, data stored in cloud, I mean, actually, this thing here might not be bad to include that and have it be able to be transferred. Do you get what I'm saying?
Sure. I mean, the difference in the case of sparse array is that you can always get the data. Once you have it stored in any form, you can always get at the data. And then in the new output, you have a new choice. But yes, we could provide that same choice.
Well, I mean, the same thing's true here.
Is that true, by the way, if you store the sparse array data in a local object and then open the computer on something that doesn't have that local object?
No, you're screwed in that case. Same thing as with the file system. That's what the word local means. Okay.
So I don't know enough about the object system. Does So I guess the UUID, this isn't a content addressable thing at all. The UUID is
randomly assigned.
Randomly assigned, which means there's going to be no matching between a local object and what you might consider a corresponding cloud object.
It would be a very interesting idea to use a hash.
You
and perhaps we should do that.
Right. I mean, you can at least you can name both cloud objects and local objects.
I know, but John is suggesting something which I think is rather interesting, which is the possibility of a unique object or something.
Well, it's in general content addressability, defining an address based on the contents. So as long as the contents don't change, the address is universal.
I kind of like this idea of having a new kind of object that is a shared kind of, and maybe it should be part of the persistent object discussion, something called, content addressed object or something, or a better name, that just has a UUID, and you might happen to have it or not. And for some reason, that's not how we've done the persistent object mechanism. I don't know why.
Well, I mean, there's a downside to it. I mean, content addressable doesn't help you find the thing if you modified it. So,
sure.
If it's likely to be modified, not so helpful. You need another indexing system for that.
Okay, but I think we need to have a discussion that involves Roman, who did the, persistent object system, about this idea. Okay, so fork that off, please. That's for Avery, I guess.
Got it.
Now, okay, so for this, let's just agree on what roughly the GUI has to look like. I think
I really want to say that I think what's currently one row needs to become two rows, right? You have the little icon, and then it should say, an external file or local object or cloud object or in notebook. And then on the second line, you see the file name, possibly just the last path component, right? You do file name take of -1. So all you see is car.mp3, and then maybe it's at a readable font size. So you actually know what file you're looking at.
Okay. Can I make a suggestion? Look, see where it's stored in, it says stored in local object. Why not say here, file, open bracket, ... blah, 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 close bracket. And then simply have in the iconic form, simply have one of those arrow things with the mouse over. See what I'm saying?
Well, I still object to getting rid of the file name entirely.
No, I'm not suggesting it. I'm saying
you didn't mean a literal ... You meant file of.
Well, Stephen followed the ... by blah blah blah. I think he meant your file name take of -1 for blah blah blah.
Okay,
that's what I meant.
I misunderstood. Sorry.
Right. So that's what I'm suggesting. And perhaps lose that icon on the left.
So the usefulness of the icon is it tells you what is the source of this. If it is a notebook, if it is file. If it
look at this. Right. Look at what I'm suggesting.
Yep.
Look at what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting, just like we do it up here, that we put this in that space. File of blah blah blah.
Yeah. No, I understand. My point was only that the icon seemed a bit more compact. It is a bit more obscure as well.
Right.
So if we do file,
I interpreted that waveform in out of 45 as the literal waveform of the notebook object. But now that we've discussed this more, I'm presuming that that's just a generic representation of the fact that this is in
that is correct.
Right. So yes, definitely obscure.
Yeah. So okay. So then in this case here, I think we would say, because we don't have an analogous thing, we'd say in notebook. Stored in a notebook. We can probably fit that whole thing. That's what I would suggest. And then after each one of these, the arrow thing, with a hover effect that allows you to change where it's stored. Am I making sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I don't think we'll need any new assets for this. I mean, maybe there's some implementation detail, but Carlo, is this something you think you can easily do?
Yeah, I mean, the implementation of switching, et cetera, that will be very easy. Anytime we touch up this GUI, it ends up being a kind of a bigger project, but this is probably smaller than the ones that we've done in the past.
Okay, fine. So I mean, in this case, when it's plush like this, we can have both the icon and the names like this.
So there is another case that we haven't looked at all, the tiny one.
Right. And I think the tiny one, there's just no hope, right?
Yeah. I don't think there's much that can be done there.
No, there's nothing you can do there.
Yeah.
Except maybe on hover. Why isn't there anything on hover here?
There is.
There's a play button, right? There is a hover.
It just says the word play.
Right.
But we could thicken that up and say something like play, and then underneath we could say something like a file name or something. Or we could have a hover on the down arrow at least. It's a minor luxury, in my opinion.
Yeah, maybe we save that for round 2.
Okay, so
I mean, I could imagine, hold on, I could imagine that the iconography of the play button could change slightly.
I feel like that would be extremely obscure as well as the icons that we have currently.
What's that?
I think that would be pretty obscure.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't be obscure to the cognoscenti, who might be the ones who will be most concerned about that when they have a list. And then
I mean, you can make the same argument for the current icons.
Yeah, and I agree. For the cognoscenti, it works fine. All right, let's go on. Are we good on this topic?
I think so.
Yep.
Great. Thank you, and let's move on. Style sheet beep.
Right. So you sent an email with this, basically the screenshot and maybe a subject line.
Okay,
and
this is about.
So well, let me. Right. So I think we all agree that people shouldn't write packlets that have bad style sheets in them. Given that when a style sheet can't be found, right? I don't know what else it can do. But what is the issue you see here?
Well, I think the main issue I saw was that I was completely confused where the style sheet was. And for example, not knowing the search path that it followed made me just, I just started searching on my computer for it's just a total mess. But I think my major issue was just that the shared style sheet, hadn't been shared was the main issue. It was shared between notebooks, but it was not shared across computer and other things.
So you're objecting to the word shared, right? So
no, I'm not really objecting. I don't think I have an objection. I had a broader objection to the fact that, that I couldn't find the style sheet. That I had been led into a situation where the style sheet was somewhere random in my file system. I had no idea where. I had no idea where it was looking. And I thought the style sheet should be in the cloud. But I think we've got a separate discussion going about how to fix that. Right.
Okay.
So I don't think there's anything.
So,
John, do you think there's anything here?
Yeah. I mean, so kind of what we were discussing with a little bit of hand waving here, because there's some, there's a bit where a miracle happens, but the kind of notion that I'm thinking about right now is, first of all, instead of getting a modal dialog, you would get an attached cell sort of interface that would give you the option, if you so chose, to go more aggressively looking for the style sheet.
I see what you're saying.
And what we mean by more aggressively looking for the style sheet would be looking in the cloud, looking in resource repositories, that sort of thing. This is a thing which will take time. So so the
But why not we just have a
operation
button saying browse for style sheet under here instead of the OK?
I really don't think I think it's very rare that that will solve the problem. It's very rare that you will successfully find the style sheet you were looking for on your system.
Yeah.
I mean, in this case, for example, the likely reason that you couldn't find it was because the style sheet was provided by DocuTools. You didn't have the DocuTools Packlet installed.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, you complain about not seeing the style sheet path, but if you saw the style sheet path, it would just be, a path salad that you would then come back and complain about the path salad. And the path salad is in part because the Packlet Manager is doing all kinds of work to extend paths as needed for new Packlets.
Yeah.
So, that's not where the magic that you're seeking is going to happen, somehow reaching out to find it on your system. Yes, there are exceptions, but I think those exceptions are rare. So, it's more likely that it's a missing Packlet, or maybe it's a style sheet that we can encourage people to publish in the style sheet repository when that's a thing, or, something along those lines. And so that's where that's where the hand waviness miracle happens here sort of thing is. But when we get to the point where we have an implementation for that, which might be slow, but we can have an interface which is basically provides what is very clearly going to be an asynchronous sort of operation, and allowing you to kind of still proceed to do things in what may be an ugly view right now, but with the understanding that the front end is trying to go out and search for a thing, and if it succeeds, then boom, everything will become beautiful. And if it fails, you'll get a notification of I tried really hard, but I couldn't find it in the end.
All right, listen, I am much more interested in having style sheets be able to routinely be put in the cloud, because then we just won't have this issue. With a style sheet repository and style sheet deployment in the cloud, we're just not going to have this issue. So therefore, that's my path as far as I'm concerned. And fixing this is, go ahead.
And that's exactly what I'm saying, is that
Okay.
I mean, the problem you're going to have is that, you publish the notebook that points to a style sheet that doesn't have a cloud object, resource object, or whatever as a style sheet. It's just a local thing. Well, you can go out into the world and fix it after the fact. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
We find that style sheet, we publish it in the style sheet repository, and we fix it for notebooks that are already out there.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I want to check. I'm surprised we're not seeing anything here from Brett on the many things that I've sent in, which were various issues with bar charts and this and that and the other.
Well, if you sent them to him and not to TLCC,
I sent them. Okay, maybe I sent them to ILD.
We do have a issue we're going to talk about next week with Brett about outliers, but design didn't have a time to look at it, so we wanted to make sure they had time.
Fine. Okay. There's some other things, Brett, about bar chart that I've sent your way.
Yep.
Brett?
Yeah, we'll get those all together.
Okay. All right. Whether to allow general patterns.
Right. So this is something that was recently reported by an external user, but I think, sort of looking into the history, it's actually been reported in sort of multiple times over the years. Right. So right now, if you do symbol : something, the result, right, that's a short form for pattern. If you do blank, then it's optional. and sort of anything else, colon is a syntax error. And there are times when you actually might want optional with sort of non-trivial patterns. You don't write.
I agree. Non-trivial right-hand sides of the optional. Right, the issue you're talking about is X blank colon F of something like this.
No, I'm absolutely not talking about that.
Okay,
I'm talking
what are you
about
talking
the
about?
case like A or B colon A.
Like this.
Yes.
I don't know. How does that parse like that? Which is certainly wrong.
How did that?
Oh,
Right.
okay, that's a syntax error.
Right.
Okay. Well, look, this is related to the composite patterns problem, which we tried to solve in the 1990s.
Not really. I mean, this really isn't. I mean, this is a parsing question, right?
Okay, define the question more precisely.
Right. So if you, right. Well, like I said, if you, right. So maybe, right, do X colon blank / full form.
Okay.
You get that. And then do X blank colon D full form.
Okay.
Right, so that's optional
Yep.
pattern. And of course, then there's X colon blank colon D, which is basically another
I get it.
thing. Now, if you want a complicated, if you basically want that in a 50, only you want to use a pattern that isn't simply blank or blank blank, some short form of blank is the only thing that's allowed right now. You can't do that. You either have to write optional, blah, blah. Or,
okay, it's this case here, right? It's this case here.
Exactly.
Okay. I think that syntax is dangerous. I don't think it's that important. And I think if you really want it, use optional.
Okay.
And I think there's too many weird cases of that left-hand side being, I haven't thought through any of them, the / semi and, I don't know. This doesn't offend me that this doesn't work. And anybody who's trying to do this, can figure out that it should be optional, I think. Anybody else have an opinion about this? I worry that it's going to blow away some syntax that we really want to use. Anybody else have an opinion?
You want to add another meaning to colon in the future? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I'm worried about, I'm worried about diagrams that have a colon in them.
I didn't really care about this before, but if you're suggesting we might add other meanings to colon, maybe I want to lock this down now so we can prevent that.
John, I'm not suggesting adding a different meaning to colon. I'm suggesting a diagram, okay? And I have not thought through all the diagrams that you might have here. Do you see what I'm saying? Diagrams like this. Mm-hmm. Because there are a limited set of diagrams that we have from the standard pattern constructs that we're currently using. Right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned that I have not thought this through. We could look at all possible diagrams that you get by having something, but if we have a general expression on the left-hand side, we have no control over that. And if it isn't a general expression, what's not general about it? You could have / semi and then some whole elaborate thing. Maybe if the precedence works.
As long as you're not trying to get close parenthesis colon working as a diagram, I think you're okay, because worst case, you can always wrap the thing in parentheses.
Okay, I just don't think this is worth doing. I think it has some danger, and I don't think it's worth doing.
Okay. There, like I said, we've had complaints about this over the years, but I don't think it's a big deal. We can always, right, I suppose we can always change our minds. If we document it as not working now, but change our minds in the future, we can always, well, then we have a new feature. Look, this now works.
Right.
So,
I think we should document it as not working.
Okay. Right, so this is basically, the subject line. It doesn't.
I think it's frigging crazy.
Okay.
I think that if ClearAll of all, maybe, even that seems totally weird to me. This is like an RM-R star that happens by default.
Yep. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it seems dangerous to me too.
I mean, if you had to write something more explicitly in there, like all, for example, maybe it's worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
Can anybody think of anything else you might write
but you can take, right, but ClearAll can take symbols, right? So we couldn't do that because then, I mean, I suppose you wouldn't.
I don't understand why ClearAll of star doesn't work. I mean, that does work, doesn't it?
Yeah, that does work.
So why are we
but that will delete everything on $context path, right?
Not just $context.
Right.
Well, maybe we need another, I don't know, we need something like this.
And will backtick star work?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know.
Somebody other than me can try it.
Well, I think the real question is, does names of backtick star give you things only in global, or does it give you other things? Okay, so this already works. Okay, so so I say we just disagree with suggestion, and we can let the user know.
And document this. Document this, for goodness sake.
Yep.
And even in basic usage, perhaps. Basic examples, and certainly in the details. That's useful.
Yep. Right. So we decided not to use system exception for iteration limit and recursion limit, but of course we still have system exception for various low-level errors like malloc.
I'm very pleased, by the way, with the thing that with what we came up with for the dollar recursion limit and so on. I like it very much.
Right.
Oh, of course I can't find it because it isn't documented.
Exactly.
Funny. Okay, so explain to me what exactly it does.
So it's basically, well, it doesn't do anything.
But it causes a return.
No, it doesn't cause a return. When a function runs into certain low-level failures, like malloc fails, then if it's properly written, it will throw an exception in order to unwind the stack and hopefully get back to a better state. And what it will throw will have head system exception, so that you can specifically try to. Right, it's basically a special head, so that if you want to catch these particular kinds of exceptions, you can do a catch of blank system exception and catch specifically those as opposed to any other.
But if they're not caught, they will be thrown to the top level. Is that correct?
Right. And actually,
so what else does that? Abort does that, but what else does that? Abort is only catchable with check abort. Is that correct?
Yes. There's well, I mean, it's I mean, no, but this isn't abort. This isn't like abort. This is like $aborted. This is the value. This has no down code or own code. This is just.
I understand. So what happens is I try and do malloc of a quintillion, and it returns null. But what comes back here is a thing where
the
output of that is system exception.
It's literally an exception, as if at that point in the code you did throw of blah. Only the specific thing you're throwing has had system exception to indicate that it was this low level error, as opposed.
What else is auto throwing?
Well, abort.
But abort works differently.
Interrupt. I mean, right? If you.
Okay, but does that work the same way? I mean, can those be caught with catch?
No. Right. The catch can only catch things that are caught by which are thrown by throw.
Okay, but so we've got a new form of aborting, which is system exception aborting, which is.
Well, I disagree that it's new. Well,
no,
actually, relative to abort. I mean, I guess yes. It's newer than abort. Yes, and it's because abort is safe for the case where the user stops the computation, whereas this is, oh my God, I'm about to crash. Let me try to not crash.
Yes, but I understand, but there's an important difference, which is abort returns to the top level and is uncatchable except with check abort.
Correct.
Whereas this, strangely, is catchable by catch. Not by confirm and close, not by check abort, but by catch.
I suppose, although confirm and close are ultimately just using throw and catch as well. They're just using specific. They're just. I know. They're just using auto-generated tags that the user doesn't see.
I know.
That you know, but it's the exact same mechanism as throw and catch.
Yeah, I know. But the fact is here that. Look, I don't understand why the malloc failure doesn't just return system exception without doing a throw. Why does it do a throw? I mean, by the time it's protected itself enough to return a system exception, why doesn't it just leave it at that and be happy?
Because things may not know that, right? Things may not know that the reason it.
Well, that's the same issue we have with the recursion limit. And Danny isn't here to defend recursion limits, but basically the mechanism.
But it's right. I mean, this is for cases where in the past the kernel would just say no more memory. Let me quit now.
I understand. I got it. I know. It's the same thing as with the recursion limit, where it says no more stack space. I quit.
Except it's not really saying that. It's sort of guessing that. Right, because
I know
because the recursion limit is user settable.
I know, but the fact is that right now the new mechanism for recursion limit is what? To return a failure object right there and not propagate the error. Correct?
Well, no, it's basically throwing up to a certain level in the evaluator, which then catches it and replaces that with a, with an evaluation failure or whatever we.
No, evaluation terminated.
Right.
Evaluation terminated.
And
so the argument I'm making.
So in this case, right, so there are in fact functions that catch this system exception and will, might try a different algorithm or some such.
I get it. So the argument that I'm making is system exception should work exactly like terminated evaluation. Possibly it should even be a terminated evaluation with cause system exception. From the way you're describing system exception, I believe it is the same as terminated evaluation. And the decision to kind of, run away and throw to top level is, seems, I don't understand it relative to the recursion limit case, where we don't do that. I don't see any reason more to do that in this case than in that case.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I can discuss that with Rob. I'm a bit surprised. I thought he was going to be here. I don't know where the breakdown happened, because he's the real expert on these things.
Well, I think Avery had to go, so we don't know from him. But that's another. Okay. Well, at least it wasn't like the meeting yesterday where all the people who were relevant weren't there. Okay, so you have to talk to Rob, but that is my suggestion. My suggestion would be to fold system exception in with terminated evaluation and have it be a cause of terminated evaluation.
Well, it already is a cause of terminated evaluation, because
no, I know, but of the terminated evaluation wrapper, right? Terminated evaluation.
No. The terminated evaluation wrapper is created by the by catching a system exception of type iteration limit or recursion limit, and then stopping stopping the exception and changing the head.
Okay, well, fine. So then this is a malloc failed type version of terminated evaluation.
Okay, well, we can certainly.
I think that's a not stupid point of view, right? And
I agree that it is a not stupid point of view.
Okay, thank you.
That's
high praise.
Whether it's correct, I'm reserving judgment until.
No, I agree. I agree.
And think some more.
Because there may be some other, weird state that's left over by this that we need to be able to unwind out of.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. See you later.